This one. Hey guys, I just wanted to say thanks for coming to this other summer PD. I cut the commercial. I got to get myself off of there. I'm gonna have feedback. Can you hear me twice now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, you're not echoing.
Yeah, here, hold on. 20-second lag. There we go. See, and technology. It's hurting me here.
Give me 1 second.
All right, I muted it. There, I think I'm good. All right, apologize. All right, well, we're here with Kevin-ish. He's not quite here, but we're here with Kevin and Elisabeth. Kevin's been with Stanford Fab Fellows this year's new cohort, and Elisabeth just does awesome stuff. She's got a great blog and a whole bunch of great information that comes on through. And you're both out on the East Coast, right?
That's right.
Great. So what we're going to talk about today is just the maker mindset and what that looks like. There's been a lot of talk about making. We were talking a little bit about offline about what maker ed is, what the maker mindset is, and how that all looks as we walk this out. And I think a lot of us in the whole maker movement, right, really see that it's not about the skills, and it's not just 21st century shop, if you may, but it's more than that. It's this innovation skill set. It's this looking into how do we get kids to be creative instead of just follow tutorials. And that's part of, I guess if I had to just make a quick definition, that's kind of part of the definition of maker mindset. Would you guys maybe define what you think the maker mindset is and even why it's important?
Elisabeth, why don't you go first?
Sure. So for me, I've been in the classroom for 14 years, and I saw such a need for kids to be able to delve deeper with the 4 C's, the critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and just being able to demonstrate creativity in their thinking. And I think sometimes our schools got caught up with trying to go so deep into the content, and we're losing touch with the creative process. And when we really think about how do we get our kids to be motivated about learning and intrinsic motivation, it's really about bringing in their passions. And I would say that everybody is a maker to some degree, one way or another. And it's just about helping kids find their passions, to find what they're passionate about making, and then incorporate it into the classroom of learning.
Great.
Yeah, that's a terrific answer. I would agree with that as well. Spent most of my career as a screen-based technology instructor in elementary, and then a couple years ago, got the opportunity to build a makerspace in our middle school. And thanks to terrific leadership there, was able to get a program off the ground that really created an experience unlike anything the kids have really had to that point. And we wanted to put them in charge of the learning and let them do things that they hadn't done before in an ungraded environment that utilized both 21st century tools and very low-tech tools. In fact, in my old classroom, the 2 most popular technologies in the room were the writable surfaces and hot glue guns. So you can do a lot with a hot glue gun.
Yeah.
So it was really empowering to see what the kids could come up with as we taught them design and not just necessarily making, or as I like to say, making that matters. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's the Maker Movement is a great opportunity for schools all over, all different types, to embrace putting kids in charge of their own learning and embracing their creativity in ways that makes the world a better place. And so that's my spiel.
Yeah. So Kevin, let me just tag off that a little bit. What do you see the difference between kind of screen-based learning and maybe tech ed of the day or educational tech versus what's going on with this students in charge of their own learning, and what's that look like even in a practical way?
Well, funny you should ask, because I'm actually doing some work right now for Google on their critical skills or their applied digital skills curriculum, in which if you're not familiar with it, is a completely self-paced, video-based, competency style curriculum that uses videos and collaborative work and the G Suite to teach kids the kinds of things that we would do in a computer lab back in the day. And this is brand new. It's just coming out. It's available now, but I'm doing some work mapping the New Jersey State technology standards to their curriculum for them. And it's really powerful because before you would have a technology instructor or someone in front of the room leading a session, or a teacher or whatever. And here's how you would do this particular challenge or project using whatever tools they were available. And now, thanks to Google, and I'm sure there's others, but Google's one I'm most familiar with, that is becoming completely self-directed. The program that they have does not even require teacher intervention. It's the kids work literally independently and then report their progress at the end when they're done, and it's pretty slick.
Wow. Yeah. Do you have a link to that?
Yeah. Let me see if I can dig that up real quick.
Yeah. Just put that in the chat window.
Okay. I'll do it right now.
And I'll paddle it over to Elisabeth. Now it's your chance. So same kind of question. You've been in the classroom for over 14 years. You've seen maybe trends. I get a lot of times when I'm working with schools, the teachers that's been there for a while, and they say, well, this is just another trend. How do you kind of address that with this maker mindset idea to help those teachers say, okay, this isn't a trend, this is a new pedagogical approach, or maybe an old one that's kind of resurfacing in a good way?
Yeah, and you're right. That's what we hear. Either it's a trend that's resurfacing, or it's a fad and it's going to pass in time. And my response is always going back to the why. The why are we doing it? Why do we want our students making and engaged with these types of learning activities? But ultimately, it boils down to when you start looking at the jobs that are out there that are so unique and different today, even such as being an app creator. That didn't exist when I was a child. You didn't even know that was going to be a possibility. Right. And so when we engage students in opportunities for making, and they're exploring their passions, these kids are starting to understand that they have the potential to create and innovate. And I think that the more they make, the more innovative their approaches become. So I think a lot of times it's helping people to see that. One thing that I love, Sir Ken Robinson talks about when there was a cohort of students at the kindergarten age, and these kids engaged in a longitudinal study. And over time, these kids, they found that the kindergartners, that 98% of those kids were divergent thinkers at genius level. And that same cohort of kids, by the time that they were 13 to 15 years old, that dropped all the way to 10%. Yeah. Which, that blows my mind. And to me, that's why we need to be able to support kids in exploring their passions, get them in scenarios where they can make, even if it's uncomfortable for the teachers. And in discussing that, I think that that's something a challenge that we come across, that teachers sometimes are uncomfortable with the making process or going into a maker space. Right. So it's helping them overcome that too. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. If you're looking at it, that's a shoe study, right? So you give everybody a shoe and you say, or you give everybody a question, you say, what could you make into a shoe, right? Or how could you make a shoe? And and then they say, well, and we would all say, well, I've only got 4 purposes for a shoe. I can wear it, I can do this, right? But the kids would say, well, I could make a giant shoe spacecraft, or because it's super divergent, right? Yeah, that's great. What were you going to say there, Kevin?
I was just going to echo that perspective, because I think the mindset of the folks that are outside looking in is really crucial, and that was a part of the a few slides that I had thrown together, kind of focus on that as far as helping the folks that are interested in the maker mindset or maker type activities. How do they really come to embrace them? And what I've found in my experience is that one of the challenges is that in a true maker space, the experiences and the learning that are going on are really happening in a way that's the antithesis of what pretty much every formal educator has ever learned. And so becoming that person that can operate in that environment is a challenge for a lot of folks, and a struggle, but it's worth it.
Yeah. Did you want to throw some of those slides up and kind of run us through
Sure,
those?
okay. Yeah, that's fine. Let me go ahead and do that.
And yeah, while you're getting that, I think, it is an antithesis. I mean, a lot of people are, there's a sage on the stage, right? The guide on the side. And so moving to that thing can be scary for educators, as they've walked out a certain way of doing it, and now they're asked to do it this different way where they maybe don't even know. So.
Sure. So do you see my slide or me?
Looking good, yeah.
All right, perfect. Yeah. So
I like
when
your
you asked me
bins.
to,
I want those bins.
yeah, when I thought about what I could possibly do as visuals, I thought about what questions I would ask, and I had a few, and I whittled it down to just a few in the interest of time. So I'm just going to bring up the first one and maybe talk through it, or we'll do the rest, or we'll let Elizabeth go. But this is actually a picture from a workshop I was just doing a week ago, 2 weeks ago, in North Jersey with some educators that were learning Arduino for the first time. And so these people had no technology experience at all prior to coming in. And these ladies are very proud of their creations that they put together. And so my question is, how much tech skill do you need to be an effective maker educator? So do you want to discuss, or want to do all three questions?
Yeah. No. Yeah, let's discuss.
Yeah,
I
let's
like
discuss
that.
Okay.
As a classroom teacher myself, now I'm at the elementary level. So some of our kids, they're digital natives. They're coming into the world with technology in their hands, and sometimes they know more than their teachers do. So I don't think that the teachers need to be the experts with the technology. I think a lot of times you have access to the technology, understand some of the basics, but when you get the kids started, what I love the most about working with my students is that it's really neat. Even when I've pushed into working with pre-K and kindergarten students with some technology, you give them just a couple little tips and they figure out the next few points on their own or with each other. And that's where that collaboration piece comes in.
Yeah, I completely agree. And so the comfort that you or I would have with that kind of a learning environment is one thing, but a teacher that is less familiar with having the kids be in control might be less willing to give that a try. What if something goes wrong? What if they can't log in? What if 3 kids have a question at the same time? And so as a screen-based technology instructor in elementary for many years prior to doing the making work I did in the middle school, I saw that every day.
Yeah.
And so we worked hard to give the kids opportunities to show what they were capable of, and then with the right scaffolding and structure, you're absolutely right. You give them a little rope and off they go. They're having a great time and creating things and just really impressing.
Yeah, and I mean, those are great thoughts, both of you guys. And it's true. You don't need to have the electronic skills. And I think that, in your workshop sounds like it could have really been challenging for teachers because they're going, ooh, it's electronics. And I have a hard time, even in the technology and the screen-based stuff, that technology isn't always about electronics or digital, right? It can be paper and tape. It can be low fidelity. It can be glue guns, like you're saying. It's the constructivism, it's the hands-on approach, right. and really the inquiry-based and maybe even passion-driven projects. So you give these ladies here some ideas of what they could do with this. Now they're actually willing to learn it, right? So
right. It's really to me, it's a matter of confidence. And in fact, I'm reading this book that was just recommended to me. It's called Teaching What You Don't Know. I just started. It's fascinating, and it just has to do with the confidence to approach a situation where you're the learner. And I can't think of a better situation or better way to model with students than to learn with them.
Yeah, give me some, because that's something I run into a lot when I'm out in the world too, workshopping or helping people. And I think about a lot. How do you get these maybe able but not willing teachers, right? How do you get them to jump in and take that risk? What strategies have you found, or have you even read in that book that kind of teaching what you don't know?
Well, I haven't gotten far enough in the book to say, but I will say that there were colleagues certainly that I had that had a predisposition for wanting to take on something new and the courage to put aside some of their other curriculum to give it a try. Because at the end of the day, that was one of the big themes in our workshop before that the picture comes from is, what are you going to not teach in order to make the time for this kind of a project? And that's a real question when you've got folks that are trying to cover their curriculum and the teacher down the halls on chapter 5 and you're on chapter 2.
Right.
What about you, Elizabeth? What do you think?
I think that is one of the biggest struggles, is helping people to understand that it's not about covering more, but going deeper and being more intentional about the experiences you're providing students with. And the fact that these experiences are so critical for students to engage in. Even when I'm looking at the picture here with the teachers, I think that for me, with teachers who are, it's out of their comfort zone, or they they may not feel comfortable with letting something else go at the time. One thing that we found useful is that we do hold, like within our school, professional learning days that teachers can come in and start exploring different things. But we also buddy up with classes. And so at the elementary level, it's worked really nicely for my fourth graders to buddy up with a kindergarten class or a second grade class. And we go in, and then the older kids can model how you use the makerspace, how you use the different technology pieces. And I think that when teachers are in there simultaneously, I think it's so important for the teachers to be able to see the interactions between the kids, because that's when I see the light bulbs go off, when they start seeing the interactions between kids, and suddenly the kids that they think struggle with math or reading, they're realizing that in the STEM world, these kids are truly excelling. They're just not given the right materials or the right opportunities.
That's good. Yeah, and I've even seen, I like that buddy up idea, and I've seen a class do design thinking that way. They take the older elementary students and they go interview a kindergartner and have them design the perfect sticker, right? Well, a kindergartner is going to give you some seriously honest feedback, right, when they're done. And then the middle school or upper elementary students get on the vinyl cutter and they cut out a sticker and they bring it back, and the kindergartner says, no, I wanted it to be blue. No, I wanted it to be shiny. No, I want it to be right. And they're given that feedback. So, and at the same time, I feel like all the teachers in the room are getting to see what's going on. And in some ways, maybe it's just creating space for those projects and not just making the teacher be in charge, because that's a project where it's pretty open-ended and the kids are driving it, but the teacher's still in the room learning from them at the same time.
Yeah, that's a great segue, actually, Mark, to my next slide.
Perfect. Let's go. And then, well, look at the, well, you guys are also on the different slide here. There's also a bunch of stuff in the chat. So Christina's got some things in there. Barbara's got some things in there that we might unpack a little bit more further too.
All right, so the question is, does making need a purpose? And what you're looking at is a prototype that was designed for a challenge through the Extraordinaires Design Studio, which is a great way to teach design. And these are attachments for a pirate to put into his hook to do various things. There's a pizza cutter, a fork. Right. And so it's really fun to get kids excited about design. And like in your example, designing for someone else. This was a fictional character, but I think it's really important that makerspaces embrace design, and particularly human-centered design.
That's great. Does making need a purpose? What do you think, Elisabeth?
I think one thing that I love watching is sometimes kids go in with one purpose of what they want to make, and then it turns into something else because they find out that one thing doesn't work one way. They tried to retool it, but along the way, a new idea came about. And I think that a lot of times, especially in your K-2, pre-K-2 ages, when it comes to making, there's a lot of exploring that's going on. How do different materials interact together? So I think that there can be a purpose. I don't think there necessarily has to be a purpose. It really depends on what you're looking for with your students.
Yeah.
Sam Patterson is a great friend of mine who's in California, who does elementary making. And what he does to accomplish this is he has puppets as the client, and the kids design for the puppets, which is really, really cool and hilarious. But the problem with this strategy is that it's a lot of work. It adds an entirely new dimension to the whole aspect of the making process. So it's not for the faint of heart.
Yeah, and I think one thing that came up, I was at a STEM conference the other day, and I was talking about cultivating the maker mindset. And one thing that came up in conversation was the difference between maker spaces that may be in an elementary compared to like a middle school or high school. And so, and I think that's a really neat conversation about there's no one way to make a maker space, that it really is about fitting it and creating it to the unique needs, not of your teachers, but your students, and allowing the students to have that voice and choice in it. Because at a high school level, it may look much different what the kids are creating and making and exploring with.
Yeah, that's a great point. It needs to be a continuum from elementary through middle on to high school, with the work becoming gradually more sophisticated, with more capability, and the final products being higher resolution. I totally agree.
Right, because as we get to the older ages, like even with my students, we do ask, like, what are you creating today? What are you making? Like, what are your thoughts? What's the design that you're having? And so we try to get them into that design thinking. compared to the younger kids who are still, they might be doing some design thinking, but at the same time, they're really exploring too.
Right, exactly.
That's great.
Awesome. Next slide is my last one. And this one we could talk all day on, so I don't want to, but we have to throw something in about assessment.
Yep.
And I know that Stanford, Harvard, and MIT are all looking at this really closely. And if I thought I'd have brought my copy of Maker-Centered Learning up, but the Project Zero results that were just published are excellent. And the book is called Maker-Centered Learning. I'll throw a link in the chat in a second. It's probably the most important book with the information research that I've read that folks in our business need to know about.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
So the picture here is actually the result of the workshop in North Jersey, where the kids the robot had to accomplish certain objectives, and every objective it accomplished, it would score points for, and that's where the totals came from.
Nice.
Oh, that's interesting.
Nice. So you kind of rubricized it, but using a little gamification kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Yep.
Wow. Just cranking out there, Kevin. I love it. Yeah. So what do you think? What do you think, Elisabeth? Kind of what's this assessment? And I think that, and let me cue that up a little bit. I get a lot, once again, it's that able but not willing, maybe teachers or that are maybe a little reluctant to move into something different. And one of the things they come back with was, well, how do I assess this? I don't even know it. Going into it, I didn't even, how can I make a rubric when I haven't learned it yet? And you're telling me you want me to learn it with the kids and then assess them on it. So
Exactly.
And that is difficult. So, when we wanted to bring makerspace opportunities to our school, it would have been so easy to just jump in and say, here's our materials, let's do makerspace. But we knew we wouldn't have teachers having the ownership over it that they needed to have. And so one thing that we did as a makerspace committee is we were told to really dream big, and that we did. We started with our why we wanted it. And the next thing we actually did, we didn't create assessments, but we did create learner outcomes. Like what do we want to see come from this? Because we didn't want this to just be, making sometimes can seem like kids are playing with something, and that's not always a bad thing, but we wanted kids to have intentionality behind what they were doing. We wanted to pull in some of the ISTE standards of empowered learner, and really looking at how do we create an environment where kids can grow in the 4 C's. And I think when you had those learner outcomes too, it helped people to understand the purpose behind making too. That sometimes we were hitting some skills that weren't being hit in the classroom, in a traditional classroom.
What I love about that, Elisabeth, is that it's such a great implementation of a growth mindset, that the kids can obviously see, hey, this is where I am, this is where I'm on the way to becoming, where it's not a graded situation where they feel bad that they haven't achieved or their robot doesn't work, and kids cry because crying is bad in school generally. But I love that approach. That's really powerful.
Yeah, and we're about to head into, this will be our 3rd year of having a makerspace in our school. So I started with a very little one in my classroom, and just with a couple makeys and just materials, like raw materials students can use. And we really started out with a low-tech makerspace to begin with. And I love, Mark, how you hit on that when people hear low-tech, automatically people think wires and that type of technology, but the technology really is paper, glue, pencils, tape, all of those things. So we started more with the Legos, and I think that helped that maker mindset grow, where teachers could see the joy coming back to the classroom and learning, and it helped the comfort level as we grew into some higher tech components.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to pull in Christina's question from earlier about how do we help staff to feel safe, because I think this assessment conversation is that that's what a lot of teachers are on the hook for, right? We all came into this profession because we love kids, but at some point there's been pressure put on everybody you have to be able to assess, you need to be able to prove, you need to be able to show. So how do you help the teachers that maybe have bought into that a little bit or just had to, right? To feel safe in a place where they can help these kids do something either low tech or high tech, and then still be able to prove a little bit of that this was worthwhile time. I
would, from From my experiences, I have been very fortunate to work with outstanding administrators who, when I came with ideas, and some of my colleagues, like when we had these conversations about what we wanted to do, we always heard yes, and how can we support you? And I think that those conversations, when you have this support, and when they understand the value, that is one of the first and foremost best ways for teachers to become those risk takers. But then it's really about teachers buddying up, sharing resources, and being willing to fail. Like, I'm the first person that I will say, right, to people that I work with at my school, I'll go for it first. If it fails, I'll let you know what I would do differently, because it's the only way we're going to learn from doing some of it. So.
You're absolutely right. The climate that teachers are in is really crucial. And if they're in an environment where they get dinged with someone walking by with a clipboard, there's no chance that innovation is going to take hold in that environment, zero. But if you've got an administrator that's encouraging you to take risk, and when a lesson blows up, they support you instead of criticize you, it's going to be extremely powerful in encouraging people to want to take the risk and try something new.
Yeah. And do you mind if I share a slide that I have here?
Please.
Okay, I'm going to try this. I've never done the share screen on here, so I'm going to.
Yeah, well, while you're queuing that up, I think, it's hard sometimes when we're in the classroom and then we have other people that maybe aren't guiding us, unless the administrator is really involved. So it's nice to be able to have the administrator on board, and maybe even a tech coordinator or somebody in the building that kind of help lead those, or even if you have some time, like you're saying, buddying up, it just sounds like a great way to be able to push it forward when you don't have necessarily a specific person in the building that can kind of be your mentor, right, for everybody. So looks like your screen's getting shared there. Good. Elizabeth.
Okay. Is it coming up with just
the
slide?
Yep.
Okay. So
you're set.
Yeah, and these are books. There's so many more. These are just, 5 books, but I know they're children's books. But what I really love is that these can be used with adults, but they can also be clearly used with children. And when we're talking about cultivating the maker mindset within the school or with kids, each one of these lends itself to a different way to be able to think about, what do you do with an idea? I don't know if you're familiar with that book, but it's such a great way to be able to show people that you might have an idea, it might be big and scary, people might be picking on you or laughing at you, but basically go with it, go after that idea, because it might be the next amazing thing. And the most magnificent thing is all about the growth mindset and retooling and failing and being able to be resilient. So I have loved using these books. Our principal has used some of these when he's come in to talk to students, but also with staff, we've been able to hear them right alongside too. And it's just been a great way for all of us to be able to learn from these stories and not just the kids. So that's been something that I think that has really helped people understand, like, it's okay to take a risk and do some different new things.
That's great. What age do you see that being, what age do you see being the biggest one for that, to be able to use those books for, like, appropriateness?
I think I would say pre-K through 6th grade, they can be used very appropriately. Now, not to say that they couldn't be used for the 7th through 12th grade, but again, that's not my area of expertise. Sure. So there must be, I'm sure there's better fit books for that too. Great. But there could be high school teachers who use these and would say they're great.
Those are great. All right, I'm going to look back in the chat here. Christina's got another one. If assessment is beyond something working or not, pass fail, then the assessment is for someone else and totally artificial. So the question would be, why should kids feel invested in designing, and how will they get a grade, right? Or maybe, why should kids feel invested in designing how they will get a grade?
Well, I guess at the end of the day, they have to show transfer. They've got to be able to show that there's been growth in terms of whether it's the information that, let's call it the core curriculum, or the subject curriculum is interested in communicating, or in the maker skill. So I had a colleague that did a project involving Raspberry Pis and literature. and she had the students illustrating from the book that they read, Bud Not Buddy, by creating some programming using Raspberry Pis. And it was based on an article that was published by a high school advanced placement lit teacher who did the same thing with her high school kids. And we learned a lot. The project wasn't like a total failure, but it was close. And I will say that the kids were very interested in the content as they could relate it to what they were trying to create. And that was the win for the teacher, was to say that the kids really got into the background of the story or this particular character. And it was evident based on what they created that they'd gotten the transfer that she was looking for.
Like transfer, that's good. Yeah, and I've seen that be an issue in schools and classrooms, just because, once again, why is it personal? Why is it something that makes sense to them? And why are they doing this? Are they just doing it for the grade? And I have that in Japan a lot. Part of just the Asian culture has, what do I need to do to get an A, right? And you hear that in American classrooms too. What do I need to do to get an A? Mr. Schreiber, what do I need to do? Oh, well, you need to learn, and you need to have a passion, and you need to, put your whole self into it. How do you quantify that? So are there any, once again, it's good to talk theologically, or maybe not theologically, but it's pedagogically, but it could be spiritual too. It's making it so spiritual. How can we bring it to the practical level? What are some practical successes that you've seen? That lesson that failed but was a good thing. How did you grade that then? Or how would you grade another one in the future that doesn't go the way that you think it goes?
And honestly, we don't assess our kids within Makerspace. So the next closest thing we do is we do project-based learning where there's a rubric. But even the challenge there that I have with rubrics, so we've gone back and forth with this conversation with people on our Makerspace committee. So the minute you have a rubric, even if you say this is the expectation at level 4, what if that rubric didn't exist and a kid would have gone past your perceived expectation of level 4? And so that's where I struggle with, I don't know with making where I fall with that, because I want kids to continue to innovate and grow and be able to think outside the box and push boundaries without me saying this is as high as you can go. Yeah,
that's good. Do you mind if I share? Oh, go ahead.
I've seen programs also that embrace the apprentice, journeyman type of continuum that use assessments of skills and dispositions rather than products,
right,
in order to help kids grow.
Yeah, let me share. I just posted one in the chat, but I'll share it here on screen share too. One that we worked on in Japan, and granted, this was a grade 9, but it was only half the rubric. The other half of the rubric was skills. And this is the closest, I guess, I could say that I've got to it. Let's see if I can get this to share here. All right, is that showing up?
For a password.
Oh, okay. I'll pull that. I'll get you guys the share.
Well, there you go. Perfect.
All right. So can you see this okay?
Looks great.
All right, so what we did is we just broke it into 4 different things, and the way I like to look at this is it's like a toggle. It's like a mix board for sound, and you have all the switches down to 0 when kids start. Maybe they already know how to do some of these things, but we really tried to look at it, developing mastery, approaching, and then what is mastery. And so we broke it down. This is a team of people, not just myself, but looking at creative confidence kind of as an idea, the effective use of the design cycle, maker mindset, which we're talking about today, and then communication. And we quantified those. They're maybe a bit hard to see, but let's say creative confidence. The first thing in developing mastery, everybody's going to start with the slider down there. You're unsure of the next steps in the design process, and you need a lot of support to take these risks and process your setbacks. But as you move that bar up, and as kids get successes in these things, I felt like it was a quantifiable opportunity to look at where students sit 2 weeks in, 4 weeks in, 8 weeks in. And now you've moved the slider up here to approaching mastery. You rely heavily on outside resources for inspiration, but you're still starting to get some idea, and you're starting to take some risks and process these setbacks. And then finally, you're at mastery of whatever age group you're in with whatever, ability that they have. And you're demonstrating that confidence and independence in the design process and dealing with falls and setbacks. So I'll get this rubric out if people want to take a deeper look at it, but
Yeah, please.
we kind of broke it into four different areas. And then we had a whole nother one that was just skills. And so you pick up your 10 skills. But then because I want you to be a little different than somebody else, they get to do the other 5 skills. And so at the end of the day, maybe everybody's on their skill slider board is, they all have the same base 5 skills, but then the other 20 different sliders, somebody's got 2 of them pegged, somebody else has a different 2 pegged. And that's kind of, focusing back into this rubric, we get to look and go, oh, your maker mindset stuff, this rubbing shoulders with people that know different things are running well too. All right, let me see if I can get it to not share. But I'll put that, you said that one still requires a password. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, what I really like about that is that it's fostering the mindset that making the creative design process, that those are all just as important as your reading, math, all those siloed content areas. I notice even in 4th grade, so my kids come to me, they're 9 years old when they come in the door, and they are so accustomed to being able to focus just on their reading, writing, math. And they don't understand that sometimes the communication process is just so important, or your creative design plan, how important that part is too. Right. So I like that highlights those areas for kids.
Yeah, it's terrific. I'd love a copy of it, Mark.
Yeah, I'm going to post that into the chat.
Thank you.
The better one here. I think this one should be the non-locked out one. But yeah. So what other, let me look back through the chat's good. It works good. Yeah, and that one took a lot of time. That was a 9th grade one. And I think it still needs work. I'm really interested, Kevin, to read some of those books and see some of that information on what's coming out. And I know the Fab Learn here in October, we'll probably have some papers submitted on that. And I know Harvard's done some stuff, Agency by Design, and all the systems and processes and some of these different things have been out. But I think that's where the rubber meets the road, and people are looking at, okay, how do we, yeah, sure, mindset's great, but how do we get this to be quantifiable? So.
Yep, and that is a big question I hear all the time.
Right. Speaking of time, how are we doing on time? Looks good. So, so Kevin, you put out some different links here. I just had them all posted. If you're in the Google Classroom or access to it, they all posted, as well as Facebook. I had them post your guys' information that you put out. Elizabeth put out a couple of links, and then Kevin shared a bunch of videos and stuff. One of those videos was Agency by Design. One of the videos that you posted was Agency by Design, and have you used that much, Kevin? And how do you feel like that fits into kind of the maker mindset?
Well, it's agency is really central to our work. Certainly, since the foundation of what we're trying to do is to teach design. At least that's what schools I'm advising now. It's really a proper context for acquiring maker skills, because we want the kids to make a difference and to embrace their innovative spirit and their entrepreneurial spirit. So agency is the center of it. There's a lot of great resources that are freely available, and one of them that I'll mention that they put out is an activity called Parts, Purposes, and Complexities. And in that exercise, as you're probably aware, you take an ordinary object and examine its parts, what their purposes are, and how they relate to each other, and use that as a context for design. People don't think about how a doorknob works, or an egg beater, or a toy, or a car, or things that are around them that are all from the design world. Those things were all engineered. They were created by people to solve problems. And so by using some of the structures that they make available on the website, including Parts, Purposes, and Complexities, and other methods that are just terrific, it makes it a lot easier for teachers to explain the importance and relevance of design to a modern learner. Because at the end of the day, the kids need to have the content knowledge. They need to know, they need to have subject mastery But as we're seeing more and more, what they need is problem-solving skills and the ability to deal with adversity and to bounce back and to approach a problem a different way and ultimately get to a solution, which is generally not accomplished with the traditional method of schooling that's paper-based and worksheet-based, et cetera. So I'm a huge supporter of that work and use a lot of their materials.
That's great. How about you, Elisabeth? You shared a couple of links, one from your blog there, talking about kind of the mindset of making in the elementary space, especially. What if you just had to pick one thing to get a teacher that hasn't done this before, like, into it? What would you tell them to do? What project or resources would you pull in? Where would you have them start?
Sometimes what can be overwhelming to teachers who are starting is just saying, here's a maker space, there's materials and items all over, go for it. That can be very overwhelming. So one thing, if you're not going to go in and buddy up with a class, one suggestion that I have is to have even a STEM challenge created, for example. One thing that I love doing with my students is we like to dream and prototype, like, what kind of wearable technology would you create that's not already invented? And we do that by asking questions, like, what are some of the problems we have, and what kind of wearable technology would solve that problem? And then we give them some LED lights, the batteries, and then a bunch of different materials, such as just everything from pipe cleaners to foam, anything in a plastic bag, and they then create their wearable technology. So I've seen people create their cat finder. So if their cat's outside at night, they can't see them. They've created a way that, their cat can wear this wearable technology and the LED lights up and you can see your cat now. So it's really neat, but it's a great way to feel like you know the materials the kids have, and you can kind of bring them through that design process too.
Yeah, that's a great example, and that's exactly the kind of experience we're trying to create for the kids, is to have them go through life noticing things around them that they can, problems that they can solve, as opposed to solving problems that are posed to them in a classroom. I mean, they go through life every day, like finding a lost cat or dealing with a variety of other things that, make their life more difficult, and empowering them to give them the tools and the encouragement that they can attack a problem and come up with a solution that could ultimately then, who knows, even potentially become a thing and become something that is, an invention that changes the world. Teenage inventors or young kids are inventing things all the time. Right. And so why not our kids?
Yeah. And I think one of the things that's coming out now when you said that is kind of on the cusp, or I think it's been around there, but these teen inventors and student inventors, making a space for them, kind of the makerpreneurship of things, and getting kids to actually create something and sell it and understand what it looks like to kind of follow the design process and have a good idea and then move forward with it. And that can be in the elementary, putting googly eyes on seashells and selling them at just a process in their classroom and doing an entrepreneurship lesson, or taking in and figuring out what it costs to do a patent search, or go to the Library of Congress and investigate things yourself. And I mean, there's so many different aspects of this that you can take it and move forward with it. Christina keeps throwing out great questions. Christina, I'm going to promote you to a panelist here if you don't stop.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
Fire up her camera.
Yeah, watch out. No, I can do that. Just saw that button. Anyway,
you can.
I know. So, but she had a question. So what if it takes 20 years for them? So they did this project. We can't quantify it in class. You have a great principal. The parents, they're happy too. But at the end of, you only got through chapter 2, like you said, not chapter 5. But maybe that going through chapter 2 was way better than going through chapter 20. But what if you can't see it in 20 years? What's our question? Because I think that hits a big point of the maker mindset, is we're saying the mindset is more important than the content, right? The mindset, it starts with a mindset, not with a tool set. How do we defend that? Because I think that needs to be a defendable position as we talk to other educators that maybe are more about, no, we need to be able to develop these certain skills.
So one thing that comes to mind when I hear this, though, is that I always start with the mindset in the beginning of the year, and then it's interwoven throughout the entire school year. At the same time, I don't save this mindset just for making. I interweave this into all of my content too throughout the school year. A lot of that growth mindset and the fact that mistakes, when you make a mistake, your brain in math, it's from the Mathematical Mindset book, but your brain grows if you make a mistake, even if you don't figure out why you made the mistake. Your brain still grows, which is significant research. So that right there shows me that when kids are trying to do something and failing and retooling, their brain is growing throughout that process. Clearly the content, we still need our kids knowing how to read and do math. That's a no-brainer. But it really is about going deeper and not wider.
I just got called on calling Christina Krista. Wait, no, Krista Christina. My apologies. Oh. I bow deeply, Krista. I got to get these glasses checked, really. That's what it is. Not the first time. Sorry, Krista. Anyway, those are great. No, and I'd love to be able to see that that research. I think anytime we can take research to the table, it deflates any, right? I mean, when I go in and I start talking, my fourth slide is Buck Institute 2015, went through a whole meta study of different project-based learnings, and they talked about here's the 5 quantifiable areas that growth based on students that did them. And so I can throw that down and say, okay, good. We have research now. Can we move on to actually talk about it? Because I think a lot of times it's just an excuse to not have to do it, maybe. And I'm not putting anybody on the grill there. I do the same thing to myself, because I can pull out a drawer of worksheets and activities, maybe even project-based activities that don't have any empathy in them or any student democracy in them. And I could probably run them a lot quicker than I could a new activity, right? And so am I feeling lazy that day, or am I going to really call myself to something bigger? And so I think we have to maybe help get rid of the excuses, but at the same time have empathy for our fellow teachers and educators, and say, yeah, it can be hard. So you don't need to do it every single time, but can you start with one, right, and find some success in it? I wanted to show, I'm going to screen share again because I saw your slide here. Pull this up here, Elisabeth. I really like this one, the making journey. And I think, can you guys see that now? I think that's a really great way. Can you kind of unpack this a little bit? Because I feel like this is a way to help the staff feel safe.
Yeah, so this was actually created for a 15-minute talk that I did just last week. So that's why there's so much on one slide. But in my journey, I was discussing about how to start, I was a connected educator. I was so intrigued by all the makey-makeys that I saw popping up everywhere in maker spaces, and I knew this was something I had to be a part of because I love inquiry-based experiential learning, project-based learning. So I knew this was something I was interested in. So being a connected educator allowed me to connect with awesome people like both of you, Laura Fleming. I could go on and on with all of the amazing maker educators that are out there that are so willing to share their ideas, resources, blogs, the trusting relationships to foster risk-taking. That goes back to the administrative relationships that teachers and administrators have, but also teachers with teachers, that it's not a competitive, we're not competing against each other. Just because I'm interested in doing something outside the box and different doesn't mean that we all have to do the cookie cutter, the same approach, but that we're all there to support each other even when times get tough. And I'm really fortunate to have a team where we do trust each other and we can take those risks with one another, which is great. In talking about developing that shared vision and learning outcomes, that goes back to the committee that we had initially, that we did not just jump into putting a bunch of products and materials into a makerspace, but it was very thoughtfully created around the why and the shared vision that we all had with those student learning outcomes, because we knew that that was going to be really important for other teachers to then want to be a part of. and the student voice and choice. So the first year we didn't have student access to the voice and choice in the summer. So the following year, as the makerspace was in full swing, we kept a board up so that students could keep a running list of all of the ideas that they wanted. That was actually an idea I got from Lewis and Clark Elementary School when I learned some things that they did within their makerspace. They kept a list of what products the students would like to have ordered for the upcoming years. And grant opportunities. There are so many opportunities to fund makerspaces. Not only do parents love to give away what we call junk in a makerspace, sometimes they may call junk, but we don't. Those paper towel rolls, we love to get those. But we were really fortunate that we got a $45,000 grant for our school district. So it was split between 3 schools in increments of $5,000 per year, which allowed us to build this three-phased makerspace and be able to really look at the needs of our students and be very intentional about our purchasing and how we rolled it out.
That's great. That's great. All right, let me unshare this now.
And, in even thinking about the whole journey of makerspace, I don't think we always know. I don't think we'll ever know exactly where the final point will be, because I think it's always evolving.
Right. That's great. Well, the reason I put that slide up there too is because I feel like we're talking about the maker mindset and we're talking about it with students, but at the same time, I think there has to be that same mindset in the collaboration, in the getting together committees, and to talking with the faculty and the staff of your school, and coming at this with a full, just with a full thought out, idea, instead of just throwing materials at it, like you're saying.
Right.
I think when you throw materials at it and then it doesn't work, that's just another reason why people can say, it didn't work, right? Well, you didn't think it out. Oh, Jason Hubbard's on the line here. Jason said, you've just been green-lighted to start teaching an intro to design thinking course with 5th graders. What's the first thing that you would do with them, or would want them to begin learning?
Oh, I can do that.
All right.
I got a favorite one. I'm gonna get it right now.
All right.
And this is an activity that we use with kids and with adults with great success. It's by Cooper Hewitt. It's called Ready, Set, Design. Some of you may be familiar with this. Let me drop it into chat. What it is a 15-minute challenge where you give teams of kids a paper bag full of a couple of routine items, and it's all the same, that they all get the same material, and a challenge. They need to design a shelter for an animal, or protect themselves from the rain, or something along those lines. And they have 15 minutes to design it, prototype it, and present it in 15 minutes. And they routinely tell you it's impossible, and then they do amazing work in 15 minutes. And it's a great, rapid approach to the concept of design, to see where you stand as far as kids with their collaboration skills. And it's actually, I've never had a group fail the challenge. There's always been something that they've created that they've been proud of. They learned about themselves in the process, and set the tone for a really exciting year.
Wow, great.
That's neat. And I like how there's the constraints in there too, where they have to learn how to prioritize what it is that they're working on.
And there's a video that explains it, and a teaching guide, and everything's all there.
Great. I'm going to add that into the Google Classroom too. And I'll try to put a chat log in, everybody, on the Google Classroom, and post it to the Facebook group too. So
I'm also looking real quick on Sylvia Martinez's blog. She just did a wonderful post. I'll see if I can find it, about on the topic of whether or not this is a fad, and whether it will. And you remember that post, Mark?
Yep. That's great.
I'm trying to find it because it's really powerful.
Yeah. Well, and once again, I think it's important to be able to debunk some of that and say this is this is constructivism, this is constructionism, this is a pedagogical approach to teaching. It's not just a fad. It's been around. It might have been cyclical, and maybe certain other fads or other things rose to the top for a while, but now this is back. And I think the thing I like to think about too is how do we, I think focusing on the mindset really helps people not not think about it as, oh, this is just learning a 3D printer. This is just learning a new tool, right? And so that I think helps us to make a good case and to be able to push forward with it when maybe we don't have the result for 20 years, like you're saying, Krista.
Well, you know, and I'm a parent too of a 10 and a 12-year-old. And one thing that I noticed, even though we have STEM in schools and they've had some phenomenal teachers, the one thing that I noticed is that outside of school, that's where they were attending the VEX robotics camps. And that's where my kids were doing coding at home with Sphero and Ollie and all of those Legos, everything. And I could see the light bulbs going off. I could see my kids fully engaged in what they were doing. Like my youngest, who is very busy in school, he would sit for hours and work on a Lego kit. So again, it's about how do we bring that into the classroom in a way to help teachers understand it doesn't mean you're making all day long. There's still room to do your content. But when you give kids the opportunity to explore their passions and become invested in everything that they want to explore and create and make, they're learning and they're innovating. And that's where you then see them become more engaged in the other content that they're doing in school. We start the first 20 to 30 minutes of the day at school, the kids start out by making every morning in the classroom.
Wow.
And what I love about that is that the kids who are dragging in the morning, they're suddenly excited to be there. Or the kids who are bouncier, they have a way to direct their energy. So it's just a great way that they can continue making without just stopping in the makerspace once a week or once every couple of weeks. And I find that they're extremely attentive when we then dive into math after that.
That's great. All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up here. And I've been liking to wrap it up with, I gave you $200 for $10 to any teacher out there. You just gave them $200. What's your practical thing to buy? A book to read, a widget, a technological piece of whatever. What are they buying for their $200? And then what would they use it for just to get going?
I know.
Okay.
I got an easy one. The dry erase material that we put on our surfaces or on surfaces that is a clear coating is very inexpensive, and it turns any surface like a desk into a dry erase board. It's called Sherwin-Williams Sketch Pad. And there might be other products that are out there, but that's the one I'm the most familiar with. It goes on clear, and when you let students and encourage students to actually write on the desks, it's a very powerful transformation for them, and it's been extremely popular and effective in my experience.
Perfect. Great. Elizabeth, what do you got you?
You know, I would go back to if it was $200, I would definitely have the teachers ask their students what they would find to be of most value to them to make. And I think typically you're going to hear them say materials. They want to get their hands on materials, LED lights, the batteries, and then all of the other little materials that they can use to connect and create with that.
Great. All right. Well, thanks so much for coming, guys. Really appreciate it. Thanks for the viewers coming. I know a lot of you in the room, so I appreciate that, and some people on Facebook too. I'll be posting this to Google, YouTube, and as well as Facebook, so feel free to share with your friends. A lot of people have been checking it out later, and this is a great conversation because I think the maker mindset is, even with your product, both of you guys, is focusing on not the skill, but on the mindset of things that allow them to play and have purpose, passion, to be thinking and writing things down. So appreciate that. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to end the meeting, and I think it will end for everybody except for the panelists. So if it doesn't, goodbye, everybody else. And we'll talk to you all later. Thanks now.
Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity.